The silence in the main conference room of Takedown Corporation was a physical entity, a high-pressure system of intellectual failure and bruised egos. For 2 agonizing months, this room had been a battlefield, and the enemy a single, elegant, and stubbornly defiant algorithm was winning. The whiteboard, a vast expanse of pristine white that covered an entire wall, was a chaotic masterpiece of defeat. It was covered in a frantic scroll of differential equations, matrix calculations, and abandoned lines of code, a visual testament to the company's collective impotence. 20 of the brightest minds in software engineering, men with degrees from MIT, Stanford, and Caltech, had thrown themselves against this problem, and all of them had been broken. The algorithm was supposed to be the company's salvation, a revolutionary logistics optimization program that would streamline their global supply chain and save them millions. Instead, it had become a black hole, sucking in man-hours, resources, and the company's reputation. A critical flaw in its core logic was causing cascading failures, a bug so subtle and so deeply embedded that it had defied every attempt at a solution. The delay had already cost Takedown nearly $3 million in contractual penalties, and their biggest client was threatening to walk at the head of the long, polished mahogany table. CEO Robert Chen, a man whose placid demeanor concealed a core of ruthless pragmatism, stared at the whiteboard with a look of weary disgust. Around him, his team of 20 experts, the best and brightest he had, looked anywhere but at him. They stared at their hands, at their expensive Italian shoes, at the city skyline visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows. They were defeated. Into this tomb of silent frustration, Kesha Williams moved like a ghost. She was there to perform her invisible duties, collect the empty coffee cups, wipe down the table, and erase the monument of failure from the whiteboard to prepare for the next round of fruitless brainstorming. For 5 years, she had been a ghost in this building, a cleaning lady who moved through the corridors of power, silent, observant, and utterly, completely underestimated. She picked up the eraser, its felt surface stained with the ghosts of 1,000 failed equations. But as she reached for the board, she paused. Her eyes, dark and intelligent, scanned the chaotic scroll of numbers and symbols. Her brow furrowed, not in confusion, but in concentration. The room was so quiet that the soft squeak of her rubber-soled shoes on the polished floor seemed to itch on. Daniel Morrison, the company's technical director and the man in charge of this catastrophic failure, watched her with a sneer. He was a man of 45, handsome in a bland, corporate way, who had built his career on a foundation of unearned confidence and a deep-seated belief in his own innate superiority. He saw Kesha's pause, not as a moment of intellectual engagement, but as the dumbfounded awe of a simpleton staring at something she could not possibly comprehend. "Don't worry, you don't have to understand it," he said, his voice loud, condescending, playing to the audience of his defeated engineers. "Just wipe it all away. We need a clean slate for the next round of banging our heads against the wall." Kesha didn't respond. She didn't even look at him. She picked up a red dry erase marker from the tray. Her hand, steady and sure, moved towards the board. With a series of swift, elegant strokes, she circled 3 different parts of the existing equation, drew a line connecting them to an empty space on the right, and then, in a fluid, unbroken motion, wrote a single, new line of code. It was no more than 20 characters long. Then she stepped back, placed the cap on the marker with a soft, definitive click, and looked at the board. A few of the younger engineers, curious, leaned forward. They stared at the new line of code. A flicker of confusion, then dawning comprehension, then pure, unadulterated shock passed across their faces. One of them, a prodigy from MIT named Ben, gasped. "My God," he whispered. That's it. That's the solution." The silence in the room was now of a different quality. It was no longer the silence of defeat. It was the silence of stunned utter disbelief. Daniel Morrison stared at the board, his mind refusing to process what his eyes were seeing. It was elegant. It was simple. It was undeniably, infuriatingly correct. The solution that 20 of the world's most highly trained engineers had failed to find for 2 months. A problem that had cost his company millions of dollars had just been solved in 60 seconds. By the cleaning lady. "Do you really think," he began, his voice a low, dangerous growl, the blood rising in his face, "that someone like you can understand something that 20 trained engineers couldn't solve?" The contempt in his voice was so thick, so poisonous, that even his own sycophantic executives looked at each other uncomfortably. Kesha Williams held tightly to the red marker, her knuckles white, but her hands did not shake, her eyes did not waver. After 5 years of cleaning these offices, of enduring the casual cruelties and the thoughtless dismissals of men like Daniel Morrison, she knew exactly who he was. And more importantly, she knew exactly what he thought of people who looked like her. "Mr. Morrison," she replied, her voice a calm, quiet island in the sea of his rising fury. "Math has no color. Neither," she paused, letting the word land with the force of a physical blow, "does incompetence." The silence that followed was so tense, so absolute, that CEO Robert Chetton, a man who prided himself on his unflappable composure, had to clear his throat to break the spell. Morrison, a man accustomed to being the smartest, most powerful person in any room, felt his face burn with a humiliation so profound it was almost a physical pain. "That's ridiculous," he sputtered. She probably copied it from somewhere. She saw it on one of the engineer's screens. He was grasping at straws, trying to reassert the natural order of his world. A world where cleaning ladies did not solve multi-million-dollar algorithms. People like that don't. People like what Mr. Morrison, Kesha interrupted, taking a single, deliberate step forward. The atmosphere in the room became electric. Everyone knew Morrison was treading on dangerous, hallowed corporate ground, the sacred territory of liability. But his arrogance, his wounded pride, was a runaway train, and his prudence had long since been left at the station. "You know very well what I mean," he sneered, his voice dripping with venom. "Don't you dare try to make yourself a victim here, just because I pointed out the obvious truth." Kesha smiled. It was not a smile of surrender. It was not a smile of embarrassment. It was the small, quiet, deeply satisfied smile of a grandmaster who has just watched her opponent walk directly into a perfectly laid, inescapable trap. For months, for years, she had noticed the whispered comments in the hallway, the condescending looks when she was cleaning his office, the racist, sexist jokes he would make with his colleagues when he thought she was out of earshot, too simple to understand, too powerless to matter. But Daniel Morrison didn't know who Kesha Williams really was. He didn't know that she had graduated from Northwestern University with honors in software engineering, that her senior thesis on algorithmic efficiency had been published in a prestigious academic journal. He didn't know that she had been recruited by Google, by Apple, by every major tech firm in the country, before a sudden, devastating family tragedy had forced her to abandon her promising career. He didn't know that her mother had been diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's at the age of 52, and that Kesha, as her sole caregiver, had been forced to take the first job she could find that offered flexible hours and immediate, comprehensive, health insurance, the job of a cleaning lady at Takedown Corporation, and he most certainly didn't know that for the past 3 years. She had been carefully, meticulously, and silently documenting every prejudiced comment, every contemptuous look, every discriminatory action, every single time he had revealed the ugly, rotten core of his character. "Mr. Morrison," she said, her voice still calm. She tucked the red marker into the pocket of her simple blue uniform. "Thank you. Thank you for making your opinion of my capabilities so abundantly, so publicly, clear. This," she patted the pocket, where her cell phone, which had been discreetly recording for the past 5 minutes, now rested, "will be very helpful." As the entire room looked on in a state of stunned, confused silence, Kesha Williams turned and walked towards the door. She walked not with the shuffling, defeated gait of a fired employee, but with the confident, measured stride of a queen who was not being exiled, but was, in fact, setting in motion a plan so complex, so brilliant, and so devastating that the man she left behind could never, in his wildest dreams, have imagined it. In the 3 days following the explosive incident in the conference room, Daniel Morrison made it his personal mission to turn Kesha Williams's life into a systematic and calculated corporate hell. Who was a man scorned, his intellectual superiority challenged by the one person in the building he considered his absolute inferior. The humiliation was a poison in his veins, and he was determined to make her pay. "Williams," he barked on Monday morning, his voice echoing through the open-plan office of the engineering department, "I need you to clean conference room 5 again. It looks like you didn't do a proper job on Friday." He pointed to a room that Kesha knew, with absolute certainty, she had left spotless. His eyes gleamed with a petty, malicious triumph, and he made a point of not hiding it from his colleagues. Kesha simply nodded, her face a mask of professional deference. "Yes, Mr. Morrison," but behind the mask her mind was working at the speed of a supercomputer. She had spent the entire weekend at her small, cramped apartment, not wallowing in despair, but preparing for war. The dining table was covered in a meticulously organized array of evidence. 3 years of it, screenshots of discriminatory emails he thought he had long since deleted, audio recordings of his prejudiced comments, captured on her phone during meetings he had allowed her to clean around, security camera footage, which she had quietly backed up from the system, showing him deliberately creating situations to humiliate her and other minority employees. And another thing, Morrison continued, his voice heavy with a false paternalistic authority. From now on, you will also be responsible for cleaning the executive bathrooms on the 12th floor. Personally, apparently, we need to make sure you're kept busy with tasks that are appropriate to your skill level. The awkward silence that followed was broken by the forced nervous laughter of two junior executives who orbited Morrison like pilotfish around a shark. Kesha noted how they, and nearly everyone else in the department, avoided her gaze. They chose to align themselves with the established power, to be complicit in their silence, rather than to confront the obvious, ugly injustice of the situation. Morrison, in his blind arrogance, had no idea who he was dealing with. He saw a cleaning lady. He did not see the woman who had graduated magna cum laude from one of the top engineering programs in the country. He did not see the woman who spoke 3 languages fluently, who had taught herself to code at the age of 14. He did not see the devoted daughter who had sacrificed her own brilliant career to care for a mother who no longer recognized her. A mother whose staggering medical bills were the reason she endured this daily degradation. Of course, Mr. Morrison, she replied, her voice so calm it was almost a whisper. Leave it to me, I'll take care of everything. Very carefully. On Tuesday, Morrison escalated his campaign of humiliation. He knew that a delegation of executives from Nakamura Dynamics, a major Japanese technology firm and TechFlow's most important international client, was visiting for a series of high-stakes negotiations. He waited until the Japanese delegation was seated in the main boardroom, in the middle of a critical presentation, and then he deliberately interrupted. "Excuse me, gentlemen," he said, his voice booming with a false heartiness. He pointed directly at Kesha, who was discreetly emptying the wastepaper baskets at the side of the room. "I do apologize for the interruption, but I need to address a pressing human resources issue." The Japanese executives, including their CEO, Mr. Nakamura, a man known for his quiet dignity and his company's deep-rooted culture of respect, looked visibly uncomfortable. Morrison, playing to his audience of one himself, began to speak in a loud, condescending tone. "Williams, could you please go and check to see if the executive restrooms are adequately stocked with paper towels? Our guests deserve the very best, and we need to ensure that every employee is performing their appropriate duties." What Morrison didn't notice, what his cultural ignorance prevented him from understanding, was the deep, profound frown that creased Mr. Nakamura's brow. He didn't see the almost imperceptible exchange of glances between the Japanese executives, a silent communication of shared disgust. In their culture, such a public display of disrespect, such a gratuitous abuse of power, was not a sign of strength. It was a sign of profound weakness and poor character. Kesha, meanwhile, seized the opportunity. With a movement so subtle it was almost invisible, she discreetly activated the recording app on her cell phone, which was in her uniform pocket. She was capturing not only Morrison's words, but his deliberately humiliating body language, his sneering expression, and, most importantly, the deeply uncomfortable reactions of the clients he was so desperate to impress. "Certainly, Mr. Morrison," she replied, her voice a model of professional decorum. "I will make sure everything is perfect for our guests." As she left the room, her head held high, Kesha heard Mr. Nakamura mutter something in Japanese to his colleague. She understood it perfectly. He had said, "Kono yona furumaya wa yonin dekinis." This kind of behavior is unacceptable, shameful. Another piece of evidence, another nail, for the coffin she was so carefully building. On Wednesday, Morrison made his most serious, most arrogant, and most beautifully self-destructive mistake. Believing he had finally, completely broken Kesha's spirit, he decided to memorialize his victory in writing. He sent an email to the entire 53-person technical team. The subject line read, "A note on competencies and limitations in the workplace, colleagues." The email began, "A masterpiece of corporate doublespeak and thinly veiled racism." Monday's incident in the conference room serves as an important reminder of the importance of maintaining realistic expectations about the capabilities of each member of our team. While we encourage all employees to be engaged, we must recognize that not everyone has the educational background or the innate analytical aptitude necessary to contribute meaningfully to our core technical projects. Some people are better suited to support roles, and we should respectfully acknowledge these natural limitations. Let's all strive to stay in our lanes, for the good of the company. The email did not mention Kesha by name. It didn't have to. The reference was as clear as it was cruel. Morrison, in his infinite hubris, had just documented his own discriminatory mindset, distributed it to 53 witnesses, and created a permanent, undeniable trail of evidence. Kesha, read the email on her phone during her lunch break. Sitting alone on a concrete bench in the building's windswept parking garage for a moment, for the first time in a long time, she felt tears burn her eyes. They were not tears of shame or sadness. They were tears of pure, crystalline, incandescent anger. Morrison had underestimated her intelligence. He had underestimated her resilience. And now, he had made the fatal mistake of underestimating her determination. She took a deep breath, the anger hardening into a cold, hard resolve. She pulled out her phone and dialed a number she had not called in years. Jessica Chen, please. A moment later, a sharp, energetic voice came on the line. Jess, it's Kesha Williams. Kesha, wow, it's been, 5 years. How are you? I'm about to be a whole lot better, Kesha said, her voice steady despite the emotional storm raging inside her. Jess, I need your help. I have 3 years of meticulously documented evidence of systematic racial and gender discrimination at my company. And today, she took another deep, satisfying breath. The man responsible just gave me the final, beautiful, self-incriminating proof I needed, in writing, and sent it to the entire department. There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then Jessica Chen, one of the most brilliant and feared employment lawyers in the state, a woman who happened to work for the prestigious firm of Morrison and Associates, ironically no relation to Daniel, let out a low, appreciative whistle. Kesha, my friend, she said, and Kesha could hear the predatory grin in her voice. Talk to me. Tell me everything. Daniel Morrison, in his pathetic attempt to put a cleaning lady in her place, had no idea that he had just declared war on a genius, and he had no idea that she had just assembled an army. The game was no longer his to control. The rules were about to change, and the woman he was trying to break had already survived storms far worse than his petty, corporate squall. She was about to unleash a hurricane. The law offices of Morrison and Associates were a world away from the sterile, corporate environment of Takedown. The air here smelled of old books, expensive coffee, and the quiet, predatory confidence of people who fought battles with words. And one, Jessica Chen's office, was a war room, its walls lined not with art, but with framed copies of massive settlement checks from corporations who had made the mistake of underestimating her. Kesha sat opposite her, a thick binder of evidence, on the polished mahogany desk between them. For 2 hours, she laid out the story, not with the emotion of a victim, but with the cold, precise clarity of an engineer detailing a systemic failure. She presented the screenshots of deleted emails, the audio recordings of Morrison's tirades, the security footage of his petty acts of harassment, and finally, the crown jewel, the company-wide email in which he had so beautifully, so irrevocably, documented his own prejudice. Jessica listened, her expression shifting from friendly concern to a kind of focused, gleeful intensity. When Kesha was finished, Jessica leaned back in her chair, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across her face. Kesha, she said, this isn't just a lawsuit. This is a corporate execution. This man didn't just harass you. He built his gallows, wrote his own death sentence, and then handed you the pen to sign it. The legal team she assembled was a collection of sharks. Michael Richardson, a senior partner who specialized in high-profile corporate discrimination cases, and Dr. Patricia Hamilton, a former federal prosecutor with a legendary track record in civil rights litigation. They reviewed the evidence, their faces grim but their eyes alight with the thrill of the hunt. This is enough to destroy not only Morrison but to expose a systematic culture of discrimination at Takedown that could trigger a federal investigation, Dr. Hamilton declared, her voice carrying the weight of her years in the courtroom. These private evaluation files you found, this is a prosecutor's dream. It's a confession of illegal hiring and firing practices, in his own words. So what's the next step? Kesha asked, her own voice calm, her mind already moving on to strategy. Michael Richardson smiled, a smile that made Kesha understand why he had never lost a discrimination case. The next step, he said, is that we are going to give Mr. Daniel Morrison exactly what he wants. He wants to make a spectacle of your humiliation. Fine, we'll give him a spectacle. But the star of the show won't be him. The plan they devised was not just a legal strategy. It was a work of art, a multi-act play designed for maximum public impact. Act 1, the firing. Kesha would return to work. She would endure Morrison's final public humiliation. He would, as they predicted, want to fire her in front of the entire team, to make an example of her, and she would let him. But she wouldn't be alone. The private investigator hired by the legal team had already planted a series of undetectable recording devices in the main auditorium. Morrison's grand performance would be captured for posterity. Act 2. The lawsuit. The morning after the firing, the lawsuit would be filed, not just against Morrison, but against Takedown Corporation as a whole. It would seek punitive damages, compensatory damages, and, most importantly, it would petition for a full federal investigation into the company's hiring and promotion practices, citing the mountain of evidence Kesha had compiled. Act 3. The media. Simultaneously, a carefully curated package of evidence, the most damning emails, the most shocking audio clips, and a compelling narrative of Kesha's story would be leaked to a handful of trusted high-profile journalists. Tech company fires genius cleaning lady after she solves problem experts couldn't was, as Jessica put it, the kind of headline that doesn't just get clicks, it starts revolutions. That Friday, Kesha walked the halls of Takedown for the last time as an employee. As she went about her duties, she was no longer just a cleaning lady. She was a ghost in the machine, a silent operative planting the seeds of its destruction. Morrison, prematurely celebrating his victory, spent the day on the phone, loudly gossiping with other executives about how he had finally put that presumptuous cleaning lady in her place. Every word was meticulously recorded. At the end of the day, as she was putting away her cleaning supplies, Morrison crossed her path in the hallway. He looked at her with an expression of pure, unadulterated contempt, as if she was something he had scraped off the bottom of his shoe. "Williams," he said, his voice loud enough for other employees to hear, "I do hope this entire experience has been educational for you. Some lessons in life are painful, but they are necessary." Kesha stopped. She turned, slowly, and for the first time in months, she allowed a real, genuine smile to appear on her face. It was not a submissive smile. It was not a respectful smile. It was the smile of a queen who knows, with absolute certainty, that her opponent's king is about to fall. "Mr. Morrison," she said, her voice carrying a new, strange confidence that made several of her co-workers stop and listen. "You are absolutely right. Some lessons in life are indeed painful, and some people really do need to learn about realistic expectations." Morrison frowned, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. He sensed a shift in the power dynamic but couldn't comprehend its source. "Have a wonderful weekend, Mr. Morrison," Kesha added, walking towards the exit. "I'm sure next week will be unforgettable." As the elevator doors closed, she could see him standing in the hallway, a look of vague, unsettled concern on his face. He had no idea. He couldn't possibly imagine that the woman he had just humiliated for the last time was not a cleaning lady. She was a brilliant engineer, backed by a team of legal assassins, armed with irrefutable evidence, and possessed of a plan so meticulously crafted that when it was executed, it would not only destroy his career but would turn his very name into a national synonym for corporate prejudice, ignorance, and a spectacular, well-deserved downfall. Monday morning arrived, exactly as the legal team had predicted. At 9 a.m., Daniel Morrison called a mandatory all-hands meeting for the entire technical team in the main auditorium. He stood at the podium, basking in the spotlight, ready to deliver the final public blow. Kesha sat in the front row, a place of honor he had reserved for her to maximize her humiliation. She looked strangely, unnervingly calm. "As you all know," Morrison began, his voice oozing with false sincerity, "our company values competence and professionalism above all else. Unfortunately, not all employees are capable of meeting these high standards." He looked directly at Kesha. "Therefore, we have made the difficult decision to terminate Ms. Williams's employment, effective immediately. Some people, simply put, do not fit into the high-performance environment we cultivate here." He paused, waiting for her to cry, to protest, to show some sign of defeat. "Do you have anything to say, Williams?" he asked, a cruel, triumphant smirk on his face. Kesha rose calmly. She walked to the microphone. She smiled, a bright, dazzling smile that seemed to light up the entire room. "Actually, Mr. Morrison, I do," she said. "Thank you. Thank you so much for this opportunity. It has been, as you predicted, truly unforgettable." She turned and walked out of the auditorium, leaving behind a room filled with confused employees, and a very, very unsettled Daniel Morrison. The next morning, at 6:30 a.m., Morrison's world ended. The first call was from James Mitchell, the company's head of human resources, his voice a frantic squeak of pure panic. "Daniel, Have you seen the news? Morrison fumbled for the remote. His own face stared back at him from the screen of CNN. Under a headline that read, "Techflow exec fires genius cleaning lady for racism after she solves multi-million-dollar problem," he changed the channel. NBC, ABC, Fox News. It was everywhere. The Washington Post had a front-page story. Secret files reveal systematic discrimination. Toxic culture at tech giant Techflow. His phone exploded. The board members, his investors, his colleagues, his wife. He raced to the office. The lobby was a chaotic swarm of reporters and television vans. He snuck in through a back entrance. Jessica Chen was waiting for him in the lobby, flanked by her legal team, a mountain of legal documents in her hands. "Mr. Morrison," she said, her voice as cold and sharp as a winter morning. "I'm Jessica Chen. I represent Kesha Williams. This is the lawsuit." What followed was not a meeting, it was a vivisection. In front of the company's emergency board meeting, with CEO Robert Chen looking on with an expression of cold, murderous rage, Jessica and her team laid out the case. The emails, the audio recordings, the secret personnel files, the testimony of Mr. Nakamura, who had immediately pulled his company's 9-figure contract after witnessing Morrison's shameful behavior. By the end of the 15-minute presentation, Daniel Morrison's 20-year career was over. He was terminated for cause, stripped of his benefits, his stock options, his severance. He was a pariah. As he was escorted out of the building by security, carrying his life's possessions in a single, pathetic cardboard box, he saw the faces of the employees he had tormented for years. Maria Gonzalez, the Hispanic employee he had deemed too competent for a Latina. James Washington, the black employee he had called typically lazy. They didn't look at him with hatred. They looked at him with a kind of quiet, profound pity. That night, as Morrison hid in his home, the curtains drawn, watching his name and face become international symbols of corporate malfeasance, Kesha Williams sat in a television studio, giving her first national interview. "I didn't do this for revenge," she told the host, her voice filled with a quiet, unshakable dignity. "I did this for every talented person who has ever been underestimated, overlooked, or dismissed because they didn't fit someone else's narrow, prejudiced idea of what they should be." In the weeks and months that followed, the true extent of Morrison's downfall became clear. The federal investigation revealed a pattern of discrimination so profound that Techflow was forced into a landmark 9-figure settlement. Morrison himself, facing a mountain of personal lawsuits and a federal indictment, was forced to declare bankruptcy. He never worked in the tech industry again. 6 months later, Kesha Williams sat in her new office, on the 25th floor of the tech tower, as the company's new Director of Innovation and Inclusion, a position created specifically for her by a humbled and transformed Robert Chen. She oversaw the complete rebuilding of the company's culture. The Kesha Williams Scholarship Fund, established as part of the legal settlement, was now sending hundreds of underprivileged students to the best engineering schools in the country. The best revenge, she had discovered, was not in destroying the man who had tried to break her. It was in building something better from the ashes of his failure. It was in proving that the most powerful algorithm of all is the one that calculates the infinite, immeasurable value of human dignity.